Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly. And in this video, I'm going to show you that how you can get started with core data with SwiftUI. Now, this is going to be a little bit longer video because I'm going to show you how you can set up the core data, how you can perform create operation, delete operation, update operation, and read operation for a very simple SwiftUI application. This is actually part of my course, the new course that I'm working on, and the course will be available in the future. I don't really have any date associated with it right now. I've just started working on the course. So this part is actually part of the course. And whenever the course is released, well, you'll know because I'll talk about it in my YouTube videos. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and create a new Xcode project. And the app is perfectly fine. Let's just call this Hello Core Data. Make sure you are selecting SwiftUI, and also make sure that this is not checkmarked, meaning that we are going to set up core data on our own. Let's do next. Location is fine. Let's go ahead and create the app. Perfect. Let's check out our preview, which is not really going to show much. It's just going to show the iPhone with Hello World written on it. And let's go ahead and change this to iPhone 12 Pro Max. All right. Now, the reason that we didn't checkmark use core data is we want to set up core data on our own. And that's the main reason. So let's go ahead and get started with setting up core data. The first thing we need to add is the model file associated with the core data. So I can go to the project and I can add a new file. And if you scroll down, you're going to see core data and data model. And that's the file that we want to add, the data model file. So let's go ahead and select that. You can name your data model anything you want. I'm just going to go with Hello Core Data Model, kind of like going with the name of the app itself. Let's go ahead and create that. Okay, so our data model is created. The whole point of the data model is to declare entities, to declare relationships, and to basically say that this is kind of like the graph the core data will be using. Core data itself is not really a database. It's basically a framework that can map a tree into, or a hierarchy of data, or a relationship into persistent storage, which can be a database, which can be an XML file, which can be binary file, which can be something else. But core data in itself is not really a database. But yes, in the end, it does, or it can persist to a database. Okay, so right now we don't have any entities, meaning we don't really have any model. We don't have anything to persist in core data. Let's go ahead and click on Add Entity. And you can see that in the entities, now we have, well, an entity called Entity. That's a horrible name for a model. So let's go ahead and change this to Movie. Right over here, you can define different attributes for the movie, meaning the title of the movie, the director, the actors, whatever attributes or properties are associated with the movie. So I'm just going to go ahead and add one attribute only, which is title, which is the title of the movie. The type will be string. That's fine. Now, if you want to check out more properties of this particular attribute, go ahead and click over here. And when the attribute is selected, you can see all the different properties of that attribute. Now, by default, it is actually saying that the title property, the value of the title property is optional. And I don't really want it to be optional because, well, title is required to persist to save a movie. So make sure that this is unchecked. Now, if you click on the entity, which is over here itself, the menu obviously changes, and it has a couple of different information. The most important part is the class name that is generated, which is right here, which is going to be called movie, and how the code generation tool will generate that particular entity. So you can see that it's saying class definition, which means that the core data is going to be responsible for writing or for creating the movie model for you. But there are some other options also. You can see that there is manual or none, which means that you are responsible for writing that particular model. There is also category extension, which means that it will create an extension for that particular model. So you can see it has different things. I'm just going to say class definition, which means that core data will be responsible for creating the model for me. All right. So this is all good. Let's go ahead and build our app. Great. Now the model file is ready. This is great. What we want to do is we want to create some sort of a manager or provider so that we can load this particular file and load all the models so that we can initialize our core data. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new file over here. I'm just going to add a group. I'm just going to call it managers. And in the managers, I'm going to go ahead and add another file. And I will call it core data manager. The whole point of core data manager is to manage core data, to initialize core data, to update a particular movie, to retrieve a movie, to delete a movie, and all those kind of operations. All right. The first thing I'm going to do is import core data. So let's go ahead and import the core data framework. Now I'm going to go ahead and create core data manager. And in the core data manager, I'm going to go ahead and create an instance of something called a persistent container. Now, what exactly is this NS persistent container? NS persistent container is basically responsible. It's more like a top-level class, and it's responsible for initializing your core data stack. It's basically responsible for loading the model and then all the different stores associated with the model. And this was introduced in Xcode 10 and above. I don't know if you remember, but when you had to initialize core data a long time ago, you had to write like a lot of lines of code. But now with NS persistent container, you can initialize core data with much less code. Let's go ahead and implement the init function for the core data manager. Inside the init function, we are going to go ahead and initialize NS persistent container. We're going to pass in the name, and the name in this case is the name of the model that we have created. So core data model, which is actually right here. Okay, that's great. The next thing we need to do is we need to load all the persistent stores. This means that whatever stores that we are subscribed to, whatever store that we need, it's going to load that particular store. By default, the store is actually a SQLite store. This means that when it is going to save the data, it's going to save the data into SQLite, which is a relational database. Description and error. If we go ahead and get an error, we're going to unwrap the error. And at this point, if we cannot even load that, we can go ahead and simply say core data store failed. I mean, there's no point moving forward, and there's literally nothing we can do at this point. All right. Let's go ahead and build that. Okay, so we have created core data manager, and if we initialize it, it's going to allow us to initialize the core data stack, which is great. The next thing we need to implement is how to save a movie. So I'm going to go ahead and create a function called save movie. You're going to pass in the title of the movie that you want to save. That's the name of the movie. And remember when we created the entity over here called movie? We need to create an instance of the movie entity, the movie class, so that we can persist that entity through core data to our SQLite database. So let's go ahead and create movie. And you can see movie. And in order to create the movie, we have to pass in the context. And we can use persistent store container dot view context. Now, the view context is a access to the context which is on the main channel, or basically the main thread. So you can simply use your UI to persist these things. I mean, it's not on the background thread, it's available on the main thread. Now, right now in this particular video, I'm not going to use the MVVM model or some sort of a view controller model with our SwiftUI app. We are just going to allow our core data to be accessible from the view, which is completely wrong, and you should not do that, but we're just trying to get hang of core data. Later on, we will introduce MVVM, so we can use it over there. We're going to go ahead and set the title, which whatever you passed in. And now we can go ahead and simply call persistent container.viewContext.save. So this means that every single thing in the view context is going to be saved. Now this method save can actually blow up, so we will make sure that we're calling it with try. And whenever there's an exception, we can go ahead and say fail to save movie, and we can also display the error. All right, this is great. Now we can actually move on to our other side, which means our view, and we can see that how we can use our view to save the result or save the movie. So this is what our view kind of looks like, and you can see it's not really much going on with the views. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and first of all create a navigation view. Inside the navigation view, I'm going to go ahead and create a stack, vstack, and inside the vstack, I can go ahead and create, let's say, enter title, and I think for the text, I think that's the another property name, right? And let's go ahead and say movie title. Make sure that we have some sort of a state. So private var movie title, and we will initialize it with nothing. So this means that whenever we type something in the text field, it is automatically going to go to the movie title. All right. I apologize. It's actually raining in the background, and it's raining ice or sleet, so you might be hearing that sound. Okay, so we are in the vstack. Let's go ahead and give a little bit of padding. This is not really about the UI, so I'm not going to mess around with the UI too much. Let's go ahead and also see if we can add like a navigation title or something, and we'll just call it movies. Maybe I added the wrong place. Let's see over here, navigation title over here, and let's go to movies. There we go. Okay, so we have the text field, but we don't really have a button. So let's go ahead and add a button also, which is to save a movie. And let's go ahead and add a spacer so everything is kind of like pushed to the top. Okay, that's fine. We can use a text field different style. So text field style will be, let's say, rounded border text field style. Okay, that's perfect. I mean, we're not doing any UI stuff, so that's perfectly fine. The next thing we need to do is we need to initialize core data manager. So I'm going to go ahead and create an instance of core data manager on the top. And as soon as I do that, the Xcode preview is going to complain because now I need to pass in the core data manager right over here. So let's go ahead and do that. Core data manager, and like this. And we also have to make sure that the app point, which is this one, that we are sending in the core data manager. So core data manager, so that whenever we initialize it, we have the core data manager. Let's go back to our content view. And inside the save function, now we can go ahead and say core data manager dot save movie, and then pass in the movie title. Now, once again, please do not do this. Do not call your core data manager from inside the view. The only reason I'm doing that is just to show you how to kind of like get started with core data. But in an actual app, you should create some sort of a view model layer, and you should use or call core data from the view model layer instead of from the UI. All right, so that's actually pretty good. And that will allow us to save a movie. Let's go ahead and run this. Now, we may be able to save a movie, but we are currently not displaying the movie. So let me go ahead and click save, and it does nothing. All right. So we need to get the movies also, and then possibly display it over here. So let's go to core data manager. Just like the save function, we're going to go ahead and create a function. call get all movies, and it is returning you, it will return you an array of movies. Now the question is, well, how do we get all the movies? Now in core data, when you need to get something or fetch something using core data, you use ns fetch request. So let's go ahead and create a fetch request, which is of type ns fetch request, but we will make it typed, meaning that we're going to tell it that this is what we're trying to fetch. And the good thing about the movie is that we can call movie.fetchRequest, and it will give us the instance of the fetch request. Now we can go ahead and perform that fetch request using persistent container.viewContext.fetch and passing in the fetch request. And this is going to return us the array of movies, which we can basically go ahead and return. Now, if this blows up, then, well, we can return nothing. We can return kind of like empty array. All right. So with this in place, now let's go back to our content view and see that if we can go ahead and load the movies. So when this is loaded, let's see where we can do that. On appear, we can say core data manager dot get all the movies. Now, if it's returning you or getting all the movies, it's returning you something, right? An array of movies, which is not really going anywhere. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and create a state over here. And I'm going to write over here also that not a good idea to use state to populate data from third-party call. Third-party, or populate the data from core data. I mean, this has to be more of the view model thing, and state is not really used for that. So I'm just writing it over here so that you know that putting the movies or putting some of these kind of things like actual data is not a good practice when you are putting it in a state variable. State variable is mainly used for controlling the UI and making sure that your user interface is in sync with the data. But since we're simply learning core data, it's fine to use it this way for now. Now I can go ahead and assign it to movies, and since the movies is marked with state, and whenever you assign the state, it's going to re-render the body. So it is at that time that we can go ahead and print something or create a list. So I can go ahead and create a list. I can say movies, and ID will be self, which is a movie object itself, and movie in, and then we can try to display the movie title. So movie.title. So let's see that if that allows us to see something. Now, one of the things you will notice over here is we do have the title property, but if you look at the bottom, the title property, even though in core data you said that the title property will be non-optional, it's not an optional, so it has to be string, but core data created this movie entity for you, a movie class for you, which does have string or title, but it is at string optional. Now, this might be a little bit confusing. Even though it is string optional or optional string, if you try to save it to core data and do not provide the title, it will complain. All right, so it's just when the class is created, it marks it with optional string. Why does it do that? I don't know why it does it do that. I think it has something to do with the compatibility with Objective-C and all that stuff. So basically, we have to unwrap it. So there we go. I can unwrap it. Let's go ahead and build it so that we know that there's no error. And there we go. I don't know when I entered this QQQ. Maybe it's reading it from somewhere else also. Okay, so we got these two data. So you can see it's displaying. Let's go ahead and run this and add another one. I'm just going to go ahead and say maybe Batman, save. When I do save, it doesn't really update. But if I stop and run it again, then you can see Batman is added. So this means that whenever we save, it would be a good idea to, well, populate the movies again or get the movies again. For that, let's go ahead and create another function. populate movies so that we don't have to type this code again and again. We can copy this code, put it over here. And on the onUp here, we can simply call populate movies. And now whenever we are done saving, which is over here, we can add another line where we can say populate movies. So right after saving, it's going to go and fetch the movies again. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this again. And we have Spider-Man, Batman. Let's go ahead and add Superman. And here we go. Let's add another movie if you want. Let's say Lord of the Rings. Boom. Great. So we were able to do a couple of different things over here. We were able to display the movies. We were able to save the movies. But now the next thing is that, well, okay, how do I delete the movies? Now, in order to delete, we have many different routes, but I'm going to go with swiping from right to left. If we do a swipe right to left, a delete button should appear, which will allow me to delete the movie. So let's go ahead and see how we can create that swipe. So I'm going to use the same list, but inside the list, I'm going to run a for each loop. And the for each loop will look exactly like what we were passing in the list. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in the self and the movie. We'll get the movie, and it's going to return a view, which will be a text view, movie.title, and like this. It's the same exact thing. But the good thing about for each is that it does come with a function called onDelete. And onDelete is going to give you an index set because you can delete multiple items. So we can go ahead and iterate through these items. We will get an index of a particular item that you want to delete, and we will get a movie from the movies so that we know that which movie you're trying to delete. And now we will delete it using Core Data Manager, which we have not implemented. So let's go back to our Core Data Manager. And let's go ahead and see that how we can implement delete movie. Delete movie, we're going to pass in the movie. And in order to delete a movie, we are still going to use persistent container.viewContext.delete and pass in the movie, which is our NSManage object. Now this itself is not really going to delete the movie. This is just going to mark it for deletion. So you have to still save your manager object context, which means that you have to call persistent container.viewContext.save. And this is going to allow you to save everything in the manage object context. If there is some exception, you can also go ahead and say that, well, I don't want to do anything now. I want to just roll back. So this is a good way to roll back, simply calling viewContext.rollback, which means all the different changes that happened in your core data have been rolled back, or in your manage object context will be rolled back. Now let's go back again. And we do have a movie to delete now. So core data manager dot delete movie, passing in the movie. And when you delete a movie, it's gone, but the UI has to be refreshed. So once again, we're going to call populate movies to refresh the UI. Let's go ahead and resume it. Let's run it. Okay, so let's try to delete this movie, which is QQQ. Delete, refresh, everything is gone. Let's go ahead and stop it and start again just to make sure it's actually gone. And now you are able to delete movies. All from core data. And core data is storing all the information in SQLite. So you can see that how fast we were able to build these things, provided that we don't really have any layers and we're writing not a good code. But hey, we're learning, right? I mean, eventually we can move all of this stuff into view models, and that will be discussed in my actual course. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to the detail screen of a movie, and then we want to update the movie. Now, this is a little bit of a long process because the first thing we need to do is we want the user to go to a detail screen. So let's go ahead and create a new detail screen. I'm going to go ahead and add a new view, SwiftUI view. And let's call it movie detail. Great. And the movie detail, you need to pass in a couple of things in movie detail. Obviously, you need to pass in the movie that you want to update. So movie, and I believe you can say let over here. We'll see. All right. If you are passing in a name, or you want to write the name of the movie, I mean, in the delete movie, or sorry, in the movie detail, you will have a text box where the movie name will be populated. You can type something and then you can update it. But before that, let's go ahead and make sure that we are satisfying this condition. So let's see that if we can create or pass in the detail object or the movie object. So I'm going to go ahead and say movie equals to movie. And let's say that if we can create a movie and simply pass it so that our Xcode preview is happy. And there we go, it's happy now. All right. The next thing that we want to do over here in the detail, let's go ahead and first make sure that we are looking at the screen. We need to make sure that we have a vertical stack. We need to make sure that we have a text field so that people can write the name of the movie. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and automatically populate it with some data. And now we can go ahead and say movie name, which is a state variable that we're going to be creating. So I'm going to go ahead and create the state variable right here. So whenever you type movie name, it's going to go to that particular state variable. You can make the text box style or the border style to be rounded. There we go. And the next thing we can do is we can add an update button, which is actually going to perform an update. And we will only update if the movie name is empty. It's not empty. Movie.title, movie name dot is empty. It's not empty, basically. So we will go ahead and say movie.title equals to movie name, and then core data manager. Now we don't really have a core data manager, so this means that is another thing that we need to pass in. All right, so that is another thing that we need to pass. So you can see that our architecture is not really good in this case, and then we will call it update movie. There is no update movie in core data manager, but you will see that update movie is going to be really simple because that particular movie object is already part of the manage object context. So if it's already part of the manage object context and you have changed something, the only thing you need to do is to save the context. And that is how you will save everything in that manage object context. Okay. Now we can go back to our content view and we can make sure that we are passing in, or we are going to the movie details screen. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a navigation link, and I'm going to use the destination part. Destination in this case will be movie detail, right? So movie detail, that's a new page that we created. We're going to pass in the movie, which is movie. We're going to pass in the core data manager, which is core data manager. And for the label, we're going to display the movie name, like the one that we were doing before. There we go. This means that whenever we select the navigation link, we will be taken to the movie details screen. Let's go and build it. I don't know why it's giving any problem. Okay, so we have a problem over here that we need to pass in another argument, which is the core data manager. So core data manager equals to core data manager. In an actual application, you're not going to be passing in the core data manager from one view to the other screen. You will put it somewhere in the global thing, which can be a environment object. Let's go ahead and build that. Great. Go back to the content view. Let's go ahead and build that also. And let's go ahead and try it again now. So let's go ahead and refresh it. Let's see if it compiles. Sometime I've seen that. There we go. All right, so let's run it. I'm going to select Spider-Man. Spider-Man is automatically populated. And instead of Spider-Man, I'm going to go ahead and change this to Batman and update. Let's go back. It still says Spider-Man. Let's go ahead and load it again. And if you load it again, you will see that it actually says Batman. So it was updated, but once you go back, it didn't really work at that point. All right, even though you were calling populate movies. Now this can be related to that you call populate movies, it fetched the movie, and since the movies is an array which contains objects of classes, it didn't really know that I need to re-render the view again. So how do you fix this problem? Now the way that you fix this problem is more of a hack than a solution. So let me show you. What I'll do is I'll create a state variable, and that state variable which will be called needs refresh, so which is going to indicate that, hey, I need a refresh or not. All right. Now, that particular value or state variable needs refresh is going to be passed down to your movie detail. So I'm going to go ahead and say it needs refresh, and I'm going to be passing it down as a bindable property. This means that the movie detail can actually change this, and if the movie detail changes this property inside movie detail, then our content view can get updated. Let's go to movie detail and first of all make sure that it is accepting the needs refresh. So I'm going to go ahead and create a binding var needs refresh, which is of type Boolean. I also have to satisfy our movie detail previews. So I do need to pass in something for the last argument, which is needs refresh. I'm going to just simply pass in false as a constant value for binding. Now, every time we are going to add a movie, or update a movie by calling update, we're going to simply go ahead and say needs refresh.toggle. And every time we toggle, this value is going to change. And since this is a bindable property, which was originally sent from the content view gets refreshed. Let's go ahead and see if that works. Let's go ahead and play it. I'm going to say Batman. I'm going to change the Batman to Spider-Man. I'm going to go ahead and say update. Go back. Oh no, it didn't update. Okay, so it didn't really update. So that is something that we need to figure out again. All right, so let's see what is going on over here. So just by changing the needs refresh is not going to, or toggling it between true and false is not going to do anything. What we actually want to do also is we want to make sure that we are using it. So I'm going to go over to list style and just going to say over here, first of all, I'm going to set the list style to something else. Let's say a plain list style. It just looks nicer. And I'm going to go ahead and say accent color. And this is kind of like a useless thing that we're doing, that we are saying that if the needs refresh is true, then accent color will be white, or else it will be black. The only reason that we're doing that, so we end up using needs refresh somewhere, right? Let's go ahead and run this again now. I'm going to go to Spider-Man. I'm going to change that to Batman, updated, go back, and now it's Batman. Hope you have enjoyed this video. If you want to support my channel, then the best way would be to check out my courses. I have a lot of courses on SwiftUI as well as Flutter. I just released a brand new course on Flutter with Firebase. You can definitely check this one out. I have other courses for RX Swift as well as Combine, and also writing your clean code. So make sure you check out all of these amazing courses, and I'm sure that you are going to love it. Thank you so much for your continued support.